Assuming you have seen the movies The Conjuring or Annabelle, you are very much aware of the reviled doll that is the star of those films. The Annabelle doll is highlighted on this rundown as one of the most spooky items in this world. In any case, there are hazier objects, including different dolls, that are more reviled than Annabelle. Here are the 10 absolute most reviled objects that have been accounted for all through time. Number 10. The Dybbuk Box. As indicated by Jewish fables, a Dybbuk box is a wine cabinet that is supposed to be spooky by a fretful, abhorrent soul that is reputed to be fit for tormenting and having the living. This Dybbuk box on this rundown, however, developed to acclaim after it was recorded on eBay with an unpleasant origin story. In September 2001, the Dybbuk Box story starts with a classical purchaser and refinisher going to a home deal that occurred in Portland, Oregon. This specific bequest deal was the offer of all things of an expired 103-year elderly person, and when the granddaughter saw that the antique purchaser had bought a wooden wine bureau, she chose to fill him in on its history. The granddaughter informed the antique purchaser that her grandma was Jewish and was the main relative to endure the Nazis' inhumane imprisonment during World War II. At the point when her grandma had moved to the United States, the main thing she took with her was the wooden box and 2 different things that survived with her. The granddaughter kept on clarifying that the wine cabinet was constantly put away and stowed away in light of the fact that the grandma illuminated her that the cabinet ought to never at any point be opened. But why? 'Cause it contained a shrewd and vindictive soul called a Dybbuk. Her grandma mentioned that the crate were to be covered with her when her opportunity arrived, however it conflicted with the Jewish practice of covering somebody, so the family failed to oblige the grandma's solicitation. The antique purchaser listened eagerly to the story, and whenever it was done, he inquired as to whether she needed to save it for wistful explanations. The granddaughter denied quickly and spat at him that they made an arrangement and he's keeping it. The vendor forged ahead with his day and carried the crate to his shop, where he put away it in the cellar. Immediately, peculiar and strange things began to happen in his studio. At some point, he got a call from his associate who was in a total distraught state, shouting that the lights had gone out, the entryways and security doors were locked, and she heard horrendous and startling sounds coming from the cellar. He hustled to the shop and upon appearance, he saw there was an odor of feline pee waiting noticeable all around and each of the lights in his shop had been crushed. The vendor then, at that point, chosen to give the wine cabinet box to his mom, and before long getting it, she experienced an extreme stroke. While lying in the emergency clinic, she spelled out hate gift to her child as tears streamed wildly down her face. He then, at that point, went out to look for new proprietors of the case, however it was constantly gotten back to him following a couple of long periods of individuals having ownership of it. Individuals let him know they essentially didn't care for it while others asserted that they felt there was something fiendish related with it. After not having the option to dispose of the case, he began to experience the ill effects of an overwhelming bad dream that was a consistent one for him. He before long found that the relatives who had been around the case were encountering a similar dream, and, to add to the horrible he continued to have, he began to see shadowy figures dart around in different rooms. He before long yielded and broadcasted that there was something paranormal related with the crate and burrowed into research about it. While he was investigating, however, he nodded off at the PC, and when he got up, he felt something breathing weighty down his neck. He quickly convoluted and saw a huge shadow figure running down the lobby. He continued to list this wine bureau box on eBay, giving an extremely illustrative clarification of the container and the occasions that have happened including it. Before long, Jason Haxton bought the crate, a custodian of a clinical exhibition hall in Missouri. He then, at that point, composed a book pretty much each of the abnormal and paranormal events that spun around the Dybbuk Box, which started the hit film The Possession in 2012. Number 9. Busby's Stoop Chair. In the year 1702, a killer by the name of Thomas Busby was going to be hanged for the wrongdoings he had carried out. Since individuals waiting for capital punishment get one last solicitation and one final dinner, he mentioned to have his last feast at his beloved bar in Thirsk, England. After he had finished his meal, he stood up and faced the other customers in the pub. He told them, "May sudden death come to anyone who dares sit in my chair." The chair then remained in Busby's favorite pub for centuries and became a game of dare for patrons of the pub. They started to dare one another to sit on the chair. During World War II, though, airmen that were by the nearby base would come into this pub to eat and, not knowing the story of the chair, would sit down in it and enjoy their meal. Patrons of the pub, though, noticed whomever sat in the chair never returned from the war. Flashing forward to the year 1967, two Royal Air Force pilots decided to sit in the chair and crashed their truck into a tree shortly after they left the pub. In the year 1970, a person decided to test the tails of the chair and took a seat in it, only to die later in that afternoon by falling into a hole where he was working. A year later, a roofer sat in the chair and died after the roof he was working on that day had collapsed beneath him. Another deadly tale of this chair is when the cleaning lady for the pub accidentally tripped over the chair and soon died from a brain tumor. The list of these dreadful tales of this cursed chair can go on, but the pub owner was finally forced to move the chair down to the basement. The basement was thought to be a safe place, however, the pub owner soon found out it wasn't when the chair claimed yet another victim. A delivery man was storing packages in the storage room one day and decided to take a rest on the seat, making him die in a car crash later in the day. A year later, in the year 1972, the pub owner donated the chair to a local museum. The way the museum displays this chair is strange but smart. They hang it 5 feet from the air, so no visitors of the museum mistakenly sit in the chair and put themselves in an unavoidable death. Number 8. Robert, the Doll. Alluding back to the network show Ghost Adventures, lead examiner Zach Bagans welcomed Robert on an examination once when he was researching the Island of the Dolls, and what had occurred with this doll fit the cases others had made with regards to Robert. Prior to their examination, however, Zach was seriously cautioned that he ought do nothing with Robert since he was entirely perilously spooky and cursed, to the point that any sort of movement with him, even contacting him, can incite the soul that has him. The account of Robert begins in 1896, where this doll belonged to a kid by the name of Robert Eugene Otto, situated in Key West, Florida. This doll was explicitly given to Robert by one of the family's workers, since they unequivocally loathed the family and fiddled with dark sorcery. Robert fell head over heels for his doll, and would go through incalculable hours chatting with him, as though the doll was alive and imparting back with him. Workers inside the home, however, began to turn out to be profoundly worried about the doll since they began to guarantee that they would hear apparition voices sassing Robert, and neighbors detailed that they would see this reviled doll meandering from one window to another when nobody was home. The doll soon started to wreak havoc inside the Otto home, and Robert became terrified of the doll. He told his parents that it wasn't him making the entirety of this pandemonium, which included rooms being screwed up, jars crushed around the home, and other ruinous things. Robert kept on being faulted for the activities of this doll, despite the fact that each time he denied the charges, his voice was loaded up with dismay and dread. Robert soon acquired the house and unfortunately died in 1972, making the house accessible for another family to come and buy it. The young lady of the family who had moved in had found the doll in the upper room and was right away terrified of it. She shouted that the doll was indeed alive and told her more than once that it needed to kill her. The doll in the long run was put away in an art gallery and historical museum in Key West, where it sits in plain view today. Individuals who have run to visit the exhibition hall to see Robert the doll request authorization to snap a photo from Robert. As legend says, if an individual doesn't request to snap a photo of Robert, they become seriously cursed. The museum has letters from cursed people to show that they are saying sorry unnecessarily to Robert for not requesting consent to snap a photo from him and argue to be set free from the spell he has put on them. Number 7. The Anguished Man. This frightful artistic creation was concealed in Sean Robinson's grandma's upper room for a quarter-century before he acquired from her. Prior to guaranteeing responsibility for this cursed painting, his grandma cautioned him that the artwork was shrewd and let him know that the craftsman who initially made this artistic creation utilized his own blood to paint with, after blending it in with the standard paint obviously, and unfortunately committed suicide not long after the canvas was finished. She additionally disclosed to her grandson that the motivation behind why she had secured this artistic creation was because she began to hear voices and crying at whatever point the canvas was shown in her home, and that she would infrequently see a shadowy figure of a man in her home. When Robinson had it in his home, him and his family began to have the odd peculiarities his grandma had encountered in her own home. One of the outrageous occasions that had happened in their house was that their child tumbled down the steps, but other claims included his wife telling him that she felt someone stroking her hair. They saw a similar shadowy figure his grandma did, and they even heard weak cries occasionally. Upset by each of the odd peculiarities happening in his home, Robinson chose to set up a camera to record all that was occurring. His YouTube recordings comprised of entryways ramming all alone, smoke ascending all alone within the house, and the painting unusually falling sometimes on its own when nobody was banging within the house or anything. These occasions constrained Robinson to conceal it in the basement, yet he actually will not offer it to anybody. 6. The Myrtle's Plantation Mirror. If you have at any point traveled down in Louisiana, then, at that point, you are very much aware of the Myrtle's Plantation and the cursed reflect it has within its home. It has been considered quite possibly the most spooky homes in the United States, and is one of the most spooky quaint little inns all throughout the planet. The actual estate traces all the way back to 1796, and has amusingly been based on a Native American burial ground, one of the most exceedingly awful places to fabricate a home. It is reputed that 10 killings have happened at the Myrtle Plantation, and paranormal movement happens every day for the visitors living within this exquisite informal lodging. Added to the spooky home in 1980 was a mirror that was set in one of the fundamental lobbies that visitors stroll by each and every day. As visitors stroll by this mirror, they have revealed that they see figures sneaking close to them in the reflection, and have shouted that kid-size imprints show up on the mirror arbitrarily, and at times there are no youngsters living within the home. The legend of this mirror tells that Sarah Woodruff and her kids have this spooky mirror. Sarah and her kids were tragically harmed to death in their home, causing individuals to comprehend the reason why there are once-in-a-while kids' hand-shaped impressions on the mirror. Custom directs that mirrors ought to be covered after an individual dies close to it so that the soul or spirits don't become trapped inside the mirror. In any case, this isn't the situation at the Myrtle's Plantation. The spooky mirror was not covered after the demise of Sarah and her kids, demonstrating that Sarah's soul is alive inside the mirror just as her kids' spirits. Number 5. Anna Baker's Wedding Dress. In 1849, Anna Baker was a young lady from a rich family and fell in love with a low-class iron laborer. In any case, her dad, Ellis Baker, objected to the man. His little girl went completely gaga for and expelled him from seeing her and his family once more, and even made it a stride further and exiled him from their old neighborhood in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Due to the activities of his girl, he destined her for an existence of spinsterhood. Anna turned out to be brimming with disdain and sharpness due to what her dad did, declining to experience passionate feelings for anybody, nor wedding anybody, and stayed cold-blooded and unpleasant until her demise in the year 1914. Before the occasions that occurred of her dad banishing her lover, Anna had ventured to buy a delightful wedding dress, her fantasy dress as some say, that she planned to wear at their wedding. Since the wedding was clearly cancelled by her dad, another affluent family bought the dress for their little girl Elizabeth Dysart. She wore the dress all things considered and began to brag with regards to how she claimed it, and how excellent it was, boasting to anybody and every individual who might pay attention to her. A long time after Elizabeth boasted around in the dress, it was given to a verifiable society, and the Baker Chateau before long transformed into a gallery for individuals to visit. The dress that Anna fell so profoundly infatuated with was deferentially put within a glass case and showed in her room. After Anna's demise, however, guests of this exhibition hall shouted that they can see her wedding dress move completely all alone, and is most likely to be seen on full moons. Individuals depict the movement of the dress as though somebody was wearing it, and is swaying from side to side as if they are admiring themselves wearing it in the mirror. Examiners of this dress attempt to evoke other consistent clarifications of this dress moving all alone, however, have shockingly come up with practically nothing. Nobody can clarify why this dress moves without help from anyone else, since it's insured by a glass case. Yet, individuals actually guess that Anna Baker at last recovered her dearest dress. Number 4. The Hands Resist Him. eBay is a magnificent creation where individuals can post items, garments, shoes, packs, DVDs, and so on. They're available to be purchased, making it simpler and less expensive for individuals to purchase things on the web. This story, however, isn't about a client leaving a positive remark about a dealer saying that individuals should keep on purchasing from them. In the year 2000, a mysterious vendor had recorded a canvas on their page called The Hands Resist Him, which was made by the craftsman Bill Stoneham. Since the acquisition of this artwork, it has been considered one of the most spooky articles on the planet. This artistic creation is of a kid remaining close to a frightful and frightening doll, and they are both remaining before a glass entryway. The artwork was made in the year 1972, and was first purchased by renowned Hollywood entertainer John Marley. After he held ownership of this canvas, it was then purchased by a California couple prior to going up on eBay. The posting about this artistic creation included different alerts about the issues every one of the past proprietors had while they had claimed this spooky composition. According to the California couple, the figures on the painting would start to move around at night, and there were a few times where the canvas would appear blank, meaning that the boy and the doll had just vanished off of the painting. The claims of the problems with this painting continued as the couple claimed that the boy would appear in the room wherever the painting was hung, and guests of the couple would feel sick and weak after admiring the painting. Children had been reported of running away from the painting after taking one look at it, screaming as they raced down the halls. Other reports circulating this painting included adults feeling unseen hands touch them on various parts of their body, and that people felt a strong gust of hot air whenever they came across the painting, almost as if someone had opened an oven right in their face to check on dinner. After these cases, the work of art has since been bought by an exhibition in Grand Rapids, Michigan. At the point when the craftsmanship display had the canvas in their ownership, they really contacted the first craftsman of the composition to illuminate him regarding all the paranormal action related with it. He was stunned that it had turned into a focal point for such amazingly paranormal action and reviewed to the specialist he was talking with that two individuals who initially showed and investigated the artwork had shockingly died inside a time of exploring it. Number 3. Annabelle. The Annabelle doll is perhaps the most spooky and cursed object known to man. Although the movie about this doll depicted as a porcelain doll with huge blue eyes and a long white dress with earthy hair, the genuine Annabelle doll is really a raggedy doll. The story goes that in 1970, a lady was in a second-hand shop shopping one day and chose to purchase a raggedy doll for her little girl who studied in school. Her little girl cherished the insightful gift from her mom and put it in her loft so she could see it consistently. Notwithstanding, a brief time subsequent to getting the doll, her and her flatmate saw bizarre and odd things were beginning to occur around their condo. These things included the doll, and the two flatmates saw that the doll would wind up in different rooms despite the fact that nobody contacted it. As time proceeded, they began to find little pieces of parchment paper scattered around their apartment with childish handwriting on it, and it freaked them out more because they did not own parchment paper. As the odd occurrences continued to happen, they one day found the doll standing on its legs, something this doll cannot do unless someone is holding it in that position. Since these dreadful events continued over a brief time with the flatmates, they chose to contact a psychic medium to address their inquiries and ideally reassure them. Upon the appearance of the psychic medium, the medium let them know that the raggedy doll had become moved by a little kid who had died in their apartment building. The medium kept on chatting with the soul named Annabelle, and the soul informed the medium that she loved the school young ladies and needed to keep living with them. The medium carelessly allowed the soul authorization to keep living with the young ladies, which simply prompted really frightening and more terrible paranormal action for the two school young ladies. One of the eerie stories of this doll is that while the school young ladies had a male companion more than one evening, the doll had assaulted him, leaving scratched notes all around his chest and middle. The most famous paranormal investigators in the world, Ed and Lorraine Warren, came to the girls' apartment and heard their request for help, and soon discovered that the doll was not possessed by a child spirit at all. It was actually possessed by a demon that masked its identity so it could get closer to the girls. The reason why it wanted to become close to the girls was because it wanted to possess one or both of them. After learning about the demon possession, the girls gave Annabelle to the Warrens, who brought it back to their house, where they have other haunted objects from their multiple investigations from around the country. Number 2. The Women from the Lem Statue. This sculpture is likewise nicknamed the Goddess of Death in view of each of the deaths related with it. This sculpture is cut from unadulterated limestone and was found in 1878 in Lem, Cyprus. In the wake of exploring it, analysts have tracked down that this sculpture traces all the way back to 3500 BC. Also, is supposed to address a goddess that was assumed a symbol of fruitfulness. The primary proprietor of the sculpture passed by the name of Lord Elfont, and an odd event occurred after Lord Elfont was in control of this sculpture for more than 6 years. Each of the 7 individuals from his family died from puzzling causes, including Lord Elfont. The following 2 proprietors of this cursed sculpture, named Ivor Minucci and Lord Thompson Noel, tragically passed on while being in control of the sculpture. The deaths of Ivor and Lord Thompson Noel were followed by the deaths of their whole families in the wake of having the sculpture in their home for just a brief time. It dynamically gets more unusual and more abnormal when a 4th individual goes along and claims responsibility for cursed sculpture. Sir Alan Biverbrook had shockingly passed on before long, guaranteeing responsibility for reviled sculpture, and it likewise killed his wife and 2 of their little girls. Unexpectedly, however, the 2 children of the Biverbrooks stayed alive. They were not huge devotees of the forces this sculpture evidently held. However, after the unusual and baffling deaths of their 4 relatives, they chose to give the sculpture to the Royal Scottish Museum in Edinburgh. In case you are hoping to see this item, and are near this exhibition hall, bless your lucky stars. Be that as it may, the story of this reviled sculpture doesn't stop at the Biverbrooks. At the point when the sculpture was first given to the exhibition hall, the chief of the section where the sculpture sits unexpectedly died. Laborers of the exhibition hall would not concede that the sculpture has extraordinary powers, and was the reason for death of the boss, yet nobody has contacted the sculpture since the boss died. Have no dread, however, the item is encircled by glass, and is shielded from human hands. Number 1. James Dean's Porsche. The popular entertainer James Dean was infatuated with his 1955 Porsche Spyder and surprisingly had it widely tweaked, so individuals realized it was his. You would believe that a vehicle that was really focused on so significantly and adored such a huge amount by James Dean would not be cursed, but that's not true. As indicated by Sir Alec Guinness, when he met Dean for lunch one day, he said that, if anybody somehow happened to get into that vehicle, they would be found dead in it around this time 1 week from now. If by some stroke of good luck individuals paid attention to him, because that is where James Dean was found dead. It was creepy enough that Sir Alec Guinness said that about Dean's car, and that Dean really was found dead in it, but the creepiness increases about this cursed car. As the car was being worked on in a mechanic shop after the wreck, it fell on one of the mechanics and crushed both of his legs. As the car gained a new owner, the new owner decided to sell the engine and the drivetrain to 2 racers. One lost control while driving and sadly crashed into a tree, dying instantly from the impact. The other driver was severely injured after his car locked up on him and rolled over. To add to the creepiness of this horror car, 2 thieves that were trying to take pieces of the car were injured. After all of the crazy accidents and injuries that have been associated with this car, it was sold to a safety exhibit of the California Highway Patrol. Incidentally enough, at the first exhibit, the vehicle burst into flames, and at the second show, the vehicle fell onto an understudy that was checking out it, and the understudy sadly broke his hip. It somehow managed to crush and kill a truck driver that was transporting it to one of the exhibits. So where is this madly reviled vehicle now? Nobody knows where it is, on the grounds that after these mishaps, it has since vanished. Individuals have addressed why this vehicle was so madly reviled, and how it could cause the entirety of this commotion, yet, all we know is that this is a vehicle to not go close.